Alright, so what this stream is gonna be about is I'm gonna go through how the effect for the garlic was created for our Vampire Survivors tutorial. If you wanna follow this tutorial fully, because we're using some materials and some sprites from the video that we covered, watch this first particle effects introduction. So you wanna watch that video first if you haven't already, before you follow this video on how to create the particle effect for garlic. So in Vampire Survivors, the garlic doesn't have an effect when you debuff enemies with it, but when you hit enemies with the garlic, they actually get a knockback multiplier, which means that when you hit them, they will fly further, and also they have lowered freeze resistance. So a good thing that you want to do is you will want to show a debuff on them just to let players know that, you know, garlic applies a debuff. This is what I've created. So it looks like this. So we just hit an enemy with it and then you can see. Okay, so because the debuff lasts for a short time, right, you don't really see it go for very long, but it helps to show, you know, hey, this enemy is being affected by a debuff. And this is how it looks like when you zoom in on it. Yeah, so I'm just gonna go through how I created this and how you can create an effect of your own like this as well. Like I've said before, if you follow the particle effects introduction, you would have a couple of materials that you will be using for this. So we'll be using the subtractive material as well as the sprite sheet from Kenny right here, because some of the sprites are from there. So let's just start creating the effect. The first thing I want to do is create the little arcs that you see coming out of the central effect. I'm just gonna call this particle effect garlic debuff, because everything comes from a center, right? I'm gonna change the shape over here to hemisphere and the sphere, so then you will see it just comes out from a circle, and we want to just push the value of the sphere to a very low value right here. And I'm gonna also set gravity modifier to 1, so then we'll have all the particles appear like that and then just drop down. Next thing I want to do is to control the lifetime like this. Because I want this particle to be dark, right, what I'm gonna do is I am going to set the material here to subtractive, and this will make the whole thing dark. So for subtractive materials, right, what it does is that it removes color from the scene wherever the particle appears. So if you want to select the color for your particle, let's say you want the color to appear blue, you have to select the opposite of blue, like that. Yellow here, and then I've got to move this thing over here. And this gives you blue. So subtractive colors will appear different depending on the background that you have them on. So if I change the color of the background, you will see that the color will change. You can see the preview here, right here. So let me just change the color here. You will see, depending on the background that you have, the color changes. Yeah, see that? So that's how subtractive colors work. So I'm just gonna have this be a dark blue color. So which means I will have to get the garlic buff to be yellow, and if you don't want the color to be so apparent, you can just reduce the saturation of the color by shifting this thing around. Let me just move this over here. So this is the color widget, and to make this appear blue, I will have to select the color opposite of blue and make sure that I set the color to the max. I don't want the effect to be so blue, so I'm just gonna move the effect along the slider over here to make it kind of bluish but not entirely blue. And the next thing I want to do is to go over to texture sheet animation, and so you will see that the particles are actually just little arcs, right? And Kenny's sprite sheet has these arcs that we see at the bottom here. So what I'm gonna do is add 3 sprites to it, like this, and just drop the sprites inside. So what I'm gonna do is I'm not actually going to use them as animation. Instead, let me just zero out the animation. So what I want to do is to randomly pick from these 3 sprites. So I'm gonna just go to start frame, gonna set this to large value. So Unity automatically sets it to the maximum frame. So what happens here is that when the particles are emitted, randomly one of the sprites will be chosen. And after that, I'm gonna just go over here and randomize the start size. So I'm just gonna have some particles be small and some particles be big. I'm also gonna randomize the rotation, 0 to 360. And this will give me particles that are randomly oriented. Okay, so this particle is supposed to add on to the other effects that we have later on. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm just gonna add a little rotation to the particle effect as well, like this. So I'm just gonna have the rotation be between 360 to 720. So, you know, they're spinning like this. And next thing I want to do also is to make the particles grow in size over time. So if I check size over lifetime, the default setting should be the size should be increasing. So you can change the size by actually selecting the different shapes here, or you can just shift the shapes around like this yourself. You can add new keyframes and you can shift the graph accordingly. So what I want to do is have the size be small and it grows bigger over time, right? So this is why the particle systems curve here, like I have this graph right here. If you can't find the graph after clicking on this, then you just gotta pull this section up. The next thing I want to do, and it's probably this is the last thing, is to go to color over lifetime and set the alpha to 0 at the end. So then we have particles that grow in size, but then they also fade away when they are about to go away. Alright, so next thing is, I think the size is too big, isn't it? Or is it the lifetime? If I reduce the lifetime, does it work? 0.3, 0.5. And I'm gonna increase the emission a little bit so that there's more of these. Okay, we're gonna tweak this later on. Let's just add more layers to this effect. So particle effects usually don't consist of just one layer, they have multiple layers. So then this makes them look organic and complex. So I'm gonna just create one more effect inside the garlic debuff. By the way, when you create a particle effect, make sure to set the rotation to 0 and the position to 0 as well. Because later on when we prefab the particle effect, it's gonna make things a lot easier for us. So I'm gonna make sure that all my particle effects are zeroed out. So next thing I want to do is to have the glow. The glow is just the ball that's in the middle. So right now, the shape here, I'm just gonna disable shape so that we have particles just concentrated in one location. And I'm gonna zero out the speed as well, because you'll see the particles actually shooting in one direction, which is not something that we want. I'm gonna zero out the speed, and all the particles will collate in one direction, sorry, in one location. Okay, so this particle is gonna be a bit different because it's looping, right? And what I want to do is to reduce the emission to what this, and I'm gonna set the lifetime 1.5, because what I want to do is for the particle, so you see the particle is just blotting in and out now, right? I'm just gonna go over the renderer here and set the material to subtractive as well. And then you see it blotting a little bit, which is fine. But what we want to do is again to go to size over lifetime. Let me just move this over here, and you can see in size over lifetime here, I am going to grab the graph, but this time I'm gonna right click and add a key over here and just move the graph like so. So if you want to be very particular about it, you can try and get the value to be exactly at 0.5. I'm not failing to do that. 5.1 is fine as well. And then you can just shift the knobs so that you make the curve look as smooth as possible. So then what we have here is a particle that kind of blobs in and out, and if you want to have it appear bigger, you can of course just increase start size and the effect becomes bigger like this. So this is the second layer of effect, and the last layer of effect is to, I'm gonna just duplicate the glow over here and call this the smoke. So what the smoke is gonna do is that it's going to be a custom texture, and this time we're gonna go back to Kenny's sprite sheet over here, and you'll see there's some smoke particles over here. It's actually for fire, but you know, we can use it as smoke as well. I'm gonna go over the renderer and make sure that it's using a subtractive particle, and I'm just gonna drop under the texture sheet animation here. Just gonna drop one smoke texture over here. So now we have smoke as well, and for the smoke, right, what I want to do is I want to randomize the rotation. That's the first thing. I want it to be a lot faster as well, so I'm just going to decrease the lifetime to say 0.5, and then you'll see it'll appear faster, and I can randomize the size as well so that the smoke is of different sizes. So probably for the size, right, it's better if it's smaller, right, because the ball is actually quite small. And if I increase the rate over time to say 10, and you see now it looks a little murky, right? And this is the effect that I want. And if it's not very visible, you just gotta increase the size, and it becomes more visible like this. And so this is a little bit different, but gives you an idea of how the effect is created. So you can continue tweaking the effect as you need, just by modifying the rate over time, or by modifying the start size and the rotation and so on. Okay, this will give you, so if let's say there's too much activity here, you can reduce the rate over time. The other thing that you can do as well is for the glow, right? Because just now when I was adjusting the size, because the ball goes all the way in, if you don't want the ball to do that, you can just shift the graph around as well. Or another thing you can do is you can just increase the rate over time. So you just gotta play around with the values and you get something that works for you. So I can get the rate over time to be 2 as well, or maybe 1.5. Yeah, so it's not a one-to-one replica, but gives you a rough idea of how the effect is done. You probably will have to play around with the values like I did to get it to be a place where it works for you. So one thing I missed out also is for the smoke, right? You can also just apply a color of lifetime to it, so that the smoke kind of fades away and it looks perhaps a little bit better, more subtle, right? Subtlety is always good. Yeah, so try doing that and then applying this to the effect. Oh, one more thing that I forgot to mention is if you play the effect from scratch, you will see it takes a little time to come out, and depending on whether you want this to happen or not, you also have to check pre-warp on all your particle effects. So if you check pre-warp, what's gonna happen is that the particle effect is, when you play it, it's just gonna appear as though it's always been there, as opposed to taking some time to grow up. And of course, lastly, I repeat this, I talk about this in all my videos, but you also want to ensure in your particle effect that under the renderer layer, you want to make sure that they are set to the correct sorting layer, because if you have different layers, and by default your particles are on the default layer. So for example, if you have a background and my default layer is behind the background, so it's not going to show. So for me, in my project, I have to make sure all the particle effects are set to the foreground, and I have to grab the correct order and layer for them as well. So just be aware of that, and you also have to make sure to set the layer for all of your effects. So it's not just the garlic debuff, but I have to go to glow and set the sorting layer here and the sorting layer here as well. And that about wraps up this video.